On the day of my stepsister's birthday banquet, the young master of the Wu family came to show his support for her. He poured red wine over my head in public. He asked, "Do you regret it?" Pressing my uncomfortable heart, I lowered my eyes meekly and said, "No, I don't regret it." I had never regretted breaking up with him. It was the 20th birthday banquet of Ning, the little princess of the Ran family. Before the appointed time, almost all the guests had already arrived. The banquet hall of the villa was decorated in a fairy tale style. Ning wore a crown and a pink dress, like a real princess shuttling around. The Ran family wasn't among the top wealthy families, but they doted on Ning to the utmost. Father Ran and Mother Ran accompanied her to socialize, and the atmosphere was joyous and warm. I sat in a quiet corner, unnoticed by those coming and going around me. Someone noticed that I was unfamiliar and asked with a smile, "Are you Ning's classmate? I haven't seen you at previous banquets in Shanghai." I raised my head. Looking into that person's eyes, I said slowly, "I'm Ran." The conversation immediately froze. The Ran family had 2 daughters. Ning was my stepsister, outstanding and dazzling, and she was spoiled rotten, but I was Ran, and I didn't even go to college. The treatment was worlds apart. Everyone in the Shanghai social circle knew that Ran, the eldest daughter of the Ran family's original wife, was very naughty and domineering when she was a child. It was said that she almost poked her stepsister's eyes blind once. Later, she was sent to live with her grandmother in a water town for a while and rarely showed up in public. Unexpectedly, she appeared at Ning's 20th birthday banquet today. After hearing my name, the person in front of me changed his expression quickly, coldly dropped a sentence of, "Why didn't you say so earlier?" and then turned around and left. News spread fast, and soon everyone around knew my identity. Glances of scrutiny came from time to time, and there were constant snickers. In a sense, I also became the focus of Ning's birthday banquet. The kind that people watched as a spectacle. The time for the birthday banquet had long arrived, but the ceremony hadn't started yet. Ning had been looking around at the entrance of the banquet hall, her eyes full of anticipation. Some guests at the banquet had already voiced their dissatisfaction, and Father Ran appeased them one by one with a smile. They were waiting for someone. The next second, Ning's eyes lit up, and she lifted her pink skirt and hurried forward. He was wearing a black suit, his forehead hair was combed up, his exposed eyebrows and eyes were like scattered stars, his skin was fair, and he looked lazy and gloomy. He wasn't much different from how I remembered him. Wu Yuan, the young master of the Shanghai social circle. 7 or 8 bodyguards followed behind him. Quite a grand display. There were gasps one after another in the banquet hall. Wu Yuan hadn't been in good health before and had even gone to the water town for a quiet recuperation. It was said that he had a bad temper and was moody, and he wouldn't even attend the most high-end banquets. Unexpectedly, he came to such a small birthday banquet of the Ran family now. The Ran family has really raised a good daughter. Even Wu Yuan has come to support her. Look over there in the corner. That's her sister Ran. People raised in the countryside are just uncultured. I heard that the Wu family is recently preparing an engagement banquet. So Ning is the secret fiancé? There were discussions all around. I raised my eyes and happened to meet Wu Yuan's narrow and long eyes, which was a bit unexpected. I hadn't expected to meet him on such an occasion. After thinking for a while, I still curved my lips and smiled calmly. Our eyes just met briefly and then moved away. Wu Yuan lowered his eyebrows, looking cold and unpleasant. He turned his head away and sneered. Although it was Ning's birthday banquet, all the eyes in the hall were following Wu Yuan. Thanks to his presence, many top wealthy families specially sent gifts and people to celebrate Ning's birthday. The smiles on the faces of the Ran family members never stopped. Ning's birthday cake was very beautiful. I was carefully eating the cream when I suddenly remembered something. One year at my grandmother's house in the water town, a young man with narrow and long eyes also clumsily made a cake for me. I felt that everything around me became quiet. I raised my eyes and saw Wu Yuan standing right in front of me. I had to look up at him. Ning had been following him all the time, gently tugging at Wu Yuan's sleeve, her voice sweet. "Ah Yuan, forget it. It's all in the past. Sister didn't really blind my eyes. There's just a scar left. Ning's eyebrows and eyes were as clear as a fawn's. The only flaw was a 1 centimeter scar under her eye. Almost anyone related to the Rand family knew that it was my doing. Wu Yuan's narrow and long eyes drooped, looking down at me condescendingly. He had come to support someone else. I didn't say anything, as if I were acquiescing. He hooked the bottom of a goblet with his finger bones from the waiter's tray, raised his hand, and poured all the red wine in it over my head in full view of everyone. Then he threw the goblet to the ground, and it shattered with a crisp sound. Wu Yuan asked coldly, "Do you regret it?" The wine stung my eyelashes and flowed down my cheeks. Pressing my uncomfortable heart, I lowered my eyes meekly and even smiled a little. "No, I don't regret it. If I could do it all over again, I wouldn't change any of my choices." There were things I didn't regret. I didn't regret scratching Ning's eyes when I resisted back then. I didn't regret meeting Wu Yuan, who was recuperating from illness when I was sent to the water town. I also didn't regret breaking up with him when I left. Even now that I knew he was the young master of the Wu family, my answer would still be the same. Don't you regret it? When I left the water town and broke up with Wu Yuan that day, he said this with a gloomy face. A bunch of camellias were scattered on the ground. I said, "I don't regret it. I won't look back." Wu Yuan didn't say anything. He was quite calm. When I got into the car, he knocked on the car window and chased after the car, his voice hoarse. Only then did I feel his emotions breaking down. Wu Yuan called my name over and over again, but I didn't look back. It was raining that day. The driver said that Wu Yuan had fallen down and couldn't catch up anymore. Looking at the rain on the car window, I just saw that he was crying. What a proud young man. He showed such an embarrassing begging look but didn't get any response. I thought, he would never forgive me for the rest of his life. What a pity for our first love. I woke up from the dream about the past in the middle of the night. Ning's birthday banquet should still be going on, but because of the embarrassment caused by Wu Yuan, I had to leave early. Presumably, it wouldn't be long before everyone in the social circle knew the story of the young master of the Wu family standing up for love and punishing the vicious stepsister. An unknown number called my mobile phone. I hung up 3 times, but the caller persisted, so I had to answer it. There was no sound on the other end of the receiver for a long time. It was drizzling outside the window. A second before my patience ran out, I heard Wu Yuan's calm voice. He said, "Ran, what do I have to do for you to love me? Are you? Never had any feelings for me at all?" I was stunned. Before I could figure out how to answer, the call was suddenly cut off. It was as if the person on the other end suddenly came to his senses and realized what he had done. Wu Yuan might be drunk or might have dialed the wrong number, I thought. No one knew what kind of person he was better than I did. I had broken up with him so mercilessly. There was no way he still liked me. I got out of bed, took 2 pills, and looked at the wind and rain outside the window. Suddenly, I missed Wu Yuan a little. That is, I really missed him when he was 17. I didn't leave the Rand family until the next morning. Actually, I hadn't lived in the Rand family for a long time. For this birthday banquet of Ning's, she insisted that I come back. Only now did I belatedly realize that she wanted to show off to me how well she was doing. She was just the same as when she was a child. She was the child brought by my stepmother and was the stepdaughter of the Rand family, but Father Rand, Tianling, had always liked her very much. Children are always afraid that their love and care will be taken away. From the first time we met, she had disliked me, unexpectedly. It was still the same now. Yesterday's birthday banquet ended very late. Fortunately, the Rand family had enough guest rooms. Many people stayed until now because of Wu Yuan before leaving. Ning was seeing off the guests at the entrance of the villa. A group of girls were surrounding her. They were probably her classmates, and their voices weren't too low. That young master of the Wu family last night was so handsome. But he left so quickly that I didn't even dare to look at him more. I heard that Wu Yuan never attends banquets. This time he came especially for you, Ning. You've kept it such a secret from us. Ning was in a very good mood, and her eyebrows were beaming with joy. This area was all mid-mountain villas. I hadn't driven here, and it was inconvenient to take a taxi. I was planning to walk down the mountain to take a bus when I heard whispers from Ning and her friends behind me. They asked Ning, "Ning, is that your stepsister? She clearly looks like a delinquent girl who hasn't gone to school. No wonder she could do such a thing. She's just jealous of you. Jealous that you have many friends, are cute, and are spoiled. She has nothing and is just a poor wretch." I ignored them and continued walking forward calmly, but then I felt that everything around me became quiet. Ning was pushed forward by her friends with a bit of coaxing. I had a feeling and raised my eyes. Sure enough, I saw the summer wind whistling at the entrance. Wu Yuan was getting off his motorcycle, with long legs, a narrow waist, and narrow and long eyes. He was undoubtedly dazzling, but I just took one look and then looked away. Ning had already been pushed forward a few steps by her friends and was blushing, standing there reservedly. I walked forward and happened to run into Wu Yuan head-on. The distance wasn't far. He stood there as if waiting for something. I walked towards him, 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Unexpectedly, I caught a glimpse of his hand hanging by his side. The veins on his hand were white from clenching it tightly, almost looking nervous. He held his breath. However, in the next instant, I just passed by him. I had already walked several steps away. I could even hear Ning happily calling Wu Yuan's name. Suddenly, Wu Yuan spoke, just 2 words, "Apologize." I stopped in my tracks and looked back. Wu Yuan, with his eyes lowered, casually repeated to the group of girls, "Apologize to Ran." Ning and her friends were stunned. Their faces turned red all at once, but they didn't dare to refute. They quickly said, "Sorry." Except for Ning, she bit her lip, looking astonished as she stared at me. I belatedly realized that Wu Yuan had stood up for me because of what they had just said to insult me. I shook my head to stop them. "It's okay. I don't care." I wasn't lying to him. There were many things I didn't care about, including the attitude of the Rand family towards me. If it weren't for the fact that I hadn't seen the Rand family where my mother used to live for a long time, I wouldn't have come back this time either. Wu Yuan, however, turned his head sideways, looking gloomy, and asked softly, "Ran, then what do you care about? I poured red wine on you, and they humiliated you in public. You don't care about any of these. What do you care about?" I was stunned and didn't say a word. After thinking quietly for a while, I said, "I don't have anything to care about anymore. In the past, it was my mother, and later it was my grandmother. But they both left me later. I'm still searching, always searching. There must be something that can make me feel alive." I walked down the mountain along the highway, with lush shade on both sides. Ning never expected that her glorious birthday banquet would end up in such an embarrassing way. Everyone was a bit confused. Why did Wu Yuan support Ning yesterday, but today he was acting as if no one should approach him when it came to her? All one could say was that this young master of the Wu family was truly moody. I didn't stay long either. As I had originally planned, I slowly made my way down the mountain. Then I heard the roar of an engine. Wu Yuan rode past me on his motorcycle, the noise hurting my ears. Soon, I couldn't even see his back. I walked slowly with my head down. I hadn't eaten in the morning and was now a bit hypoglycemic, so I stopped and squatted on the ground to take a rest for a while. The sunlight shone on me, leaving a small shadow on the ground. After a while, the motorcycle came back. He stopped beside me, and then there were 2 shadows on the ground. Wu Yuan bent down and stretched out his hand. There were 2 toffees in it. The lines on his palm were clear, and golden dust was floating in the light. He said, "Your candies." I raised my head and blurted out, "You have a heart problem. Why are you still riding a motorcycle?" Wu Yuan's face suddenly turned ugly. He gave a rather self-deprecating and embarrassed laugh, his eyes dark. "Ran, thanks to you, I'm cured. No one wants to be a semi-cripple all the time. That operation was so painful and dangerous, but thinking of your mockery, I managed to endure it. Meeting Wu Yuan was an accident. Breaking up with him was too. I lived at my grandmother's house in the water town. Crossing the stone bridge over the flowing water, there was a beautiful small Jiangnan-style courtyard on the opposite side. I was often curious back then when I knew that a new young man had moved in there. The white wall was low, and the banana plants grew out over it. I stood on tiptoe and peeked into the courtyard. I saw a young man with narrow eyes frowning as he looked at me. He was no different from ordinary people, except that he didn't look too well, and the black wristband on his wrist was beeping. Wu Yuan wasn't an easy person to approach and liked to be sarcastic, but I was a bit short of friends. He had a bad temper, but he looked really nice when he smiled. It's just that he seldom smiled. I wanted to make him smile more. So I took him to see the tea mountains and told him where the white camellias were the most crystal clear. We watched the fireflies at night in the mountain stream together and waded through the stream that had just melted in early spring. From the first time we met until later, he always wore that black wristband on his wrist. It would beep when he secretly kissed me, when he held my hand, and when he ran. He was no different. Wu Yuan was just someone who liked me more than others, until that night at the beginning of summer. I just took him to the top of the mountain to watch the sunset. The sky was filled with the glow of the setting sun. We had agreed to go pick lotus seeds at the end of summer. But before we even got back to the town, he fainted. He closed his eyes quietly, like the impatient sleeping prince in a fairy tale, and only the wristband on his wrist kept beeping. Only then did I realize that it was a heart rate monitor wristband. Wu Yuan had a heart problem, and every time the wristband beeped, it was a warning. What a proud and self-abased young man he was. He refused to tell me about his defect even a little bit. The first thing he did when he woke up was to look at my expression. I thought about what I said to him at that time. I said, "Wu Yuan, I'm leaving here. I'm leaving the water town." He looked at me for a long time and said in a hoarse voice, "Where are you going?" "I'll go with you." I patiently replied, "We can't be together anymore in the future. You don't need to accompany me. We're not suitable." "What's not suitable?" Even though I had made it so clear, he still wouldn't let go. So I had to be honest. "You're sick, but I don't like your illness." Wu Yuan grasped my hand so tightly that it hurt. He wasn't the kind of person who would apologize, but he lowered his eyes and said to me with difficulty, "If it's because I didn't tell you in advance, it's my fault. I don't want your pity. I wanted you to think that I was the same as you." I slowly pulled my hand out bit by bit, looked at him calmly, and said, "If you had told me from the beginning that you had a heart disease, then I wouldn't even have come to know you. If I had known about your defect earlier, I would rather never have approached you out of curiosity." His face turned deathly pale. That summer ended before it even began. I knew that Wu Yuan had grudges in his heart, so when we met again and he poured red wine on my head, I wasn't angry. But I should no longer have any deeper feelings for him. But now that Wu Yuan's illness was cured, he was still being self-deprecating. That comment about himself being a cripple was like a wheat on that pricked my heart slightly. It didn't hurt much, but it made me feel so sour that I wanted to cry. On the highway, under the lush trees, beside the motorcycle, the first thing I said to the boy I reunited with after a long separation was, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I didn't put it more tactfully or be more lenient when I told him the reason for breaking up." Although it was the truth, it was unavoidably hurtful. The second sentence was, "Congratulations. Congratulations on your recovery from the long illness. Congratulations on perhaps having really found someone you like. Even if it's Ning, as long as you like her, I wish you well. But it's all in the past. There's no need to dwell on it too much." Wu Yuan bent down, put the candies in my palm, and said coldly, word by word, "I don't accept it." "Rand, did you hear me clearly? My life can be divided into 3 parts. The first part was during my childhood. My family was harmonious and could be considered complete. The only fly in the ointment was that my mother had been bedridden for years, but she was the gentlest and nicest woman I had ever met. The second part was during my teenage years. After my mother died of illness, my father remarried. My stepmother and stepsister didn't like me at all. There were constant conflicts between us until finally I was sent to my grandmother's house in the water town. In the same year, I stopped calling Tianling father. Also in the water town, my grandmother had an illness and passed away, and then I met Wu Yuan. The third part was from the time I left the water town until now. I had never returned to the Rand family. Later, I opened a gallery with my friends. It was difficult at the start, but now it's on the right track. I picked up a paintbrush, wanting to paint, but I was distracted and couldn't put the first stroke down for a long time. Then I received a phone call. It was from my partner. She only said one sentence. Rand, there's something wrong at the gallery. The gallery had recently planned a new exhibition and it was a busy time. I put down my painting tools and went out right away. My partner was a senior who studied painting with me before, and I had always called her senior. Her tone was calm, but the background was a bit noisy, as if something had gone wrong. Fortunately, the gallery wasn't far away and I quickly arrived at the scene. Senior was surrounded by several young girls who were visiting the exhibition. Facing their emotional accusations and doubts, she could still maintain her smile and dignity. I slowed down my pace and then realized why these girls looked familiar to me. It was because I had seen them in the Rand family. Ning was among them as well. On the gray wall behind them, there was a huge oil painting of white camellias hanging high. Ning pointed at the oil painting on the wall and challenged, "How dare your gallery exhibit a fake painting? Miss Ren hasn't painted for a long time. Everyone in the industry knows that she went to receive treatment. Even if she consigned her paintings for sale, how could she put them in such an unknown small gallery? The brushwork style is completely different from her previous works. It's really Rand's style to cheat." I listened quietly until the last sentence and suddenly realized that Ning was targeting me. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been such a coincidence that she was here. Senior had already seen me and smiled at me. Ning turned her head and with rare sisterly affection, said, "Sister Ran, if the family finds out that you're using fake paintings as a gimmick, they'll be completely disappointed in you. Several famous collectors are here today. You'd better take these paintings down first. The face of the Rand family will be really embarrassed." The commotion here was quite big and many people stopped and frowned as they watched. I looked at Ning quietly for a while and then said calmly, "This is my painting." As soon as I said this, Ning's friends sneered first. "Your painting? You didn't even go to college. You went to high school in that shabby town. You probably couldn't even get into a junior college. Even if this is a fake painting, it's not something you could have painted." "I'm Ran," I said. I wasn't angry because of their rudeness. Sure enough, Ning's friends laughed even more happily. Only Ning had a frozen smile on her lips. Maybe she suddenly realized that. No one knew better than her how vivid and charming the paintings I had painted when I was young were before she tore them up. As if to confirm it, a man who had been admiring the painting for a long time stepped forward. I had already recognized him. He was a very authoritative collector in the industry and we had communicated before. He stretched out his hand and smiled at me gently. "Miss Ran, long time no see." He seemed to be just chatting about old times, but actually he was confirming that what I said was true from the side. After greeting him, I had time to look back at Ning and her friends. They stood there in a daze, their faces full of disbelief. I patiently explained, "Today's exhibition at the gallery is by invitation only for members. I remember that I didn't send you an invitation. Senior, please call the security guards." Ning and her friends were all driven away. I stayed to help Senior. Senior teased me, "Junior, you're really low-key. Even your stepsister doesn't know that your paintings are so famous." I just shook my head and said, "There's no need. There are many things that I don't care about, so there's no need. The Rand family thinks it's shameful that I didn't go to college, but I had already learned what I needed to learn from my teachers, so there's no need. Ning always comes to provoke me to get a sense of her own existence, but I'm not angry because there's no need. Then what is necessary? I don't know." As the night gradually deepened, there were a lot fewer people in the gallery. That huge oil painting of camellias was still hanging there. But someone was standing quietly below it, not looking at the oil painting but at the author's signature, Rand, below it. Wu Yuan turned around. This time, he didn't say anything. His expression was very cold, just like he was facing a complete stranger. He walked past me without saying a word. Perhaps he remembered that rainy season in the Jiangnan region. He was chasing after the girl with camellias in his hands. Unfortunately, she didn't turn back or soften her heart. There have been a lot of banquets recently. I had just attended Ning's birthday banquet when I stepped into the hustle and bustle of the Wu family's manor. I wasn't really keen on such occasions. But young Master Wu had bought a lot of paintings in one go at the gallery's exhibition, including that painting of camellias. Senior couldn't get away because of something, so I had to take people to deliver them in person. Senior said that after this busy period, she would give me a holiday and I could go wherever I wanted. Originally, everything went smoothly. The paintings had been handed over, but some problems arose when I was leaving. I happened to see Ning and Wu Yuan together in the garden. Ning was sobbing and said, "Ah Yuan, on my birthday, you clearly came to attend specially and even stood up for me and taught Ran a lesson. Why did you turn around and chase her on your motorcycle and buy so many paintings from her small gallery? Have you also been deceived by Ran's appearance? Ah Yuan, she almost poked my eyes out before. Do you know what a horrible person she is? She won't like you as I do." Wu Yuan had a calm expression and asked casually, "If I had a heart disease, would you still like me?" Ning didn't even hesitate for a moment. "Of course. No matter what you're like, I'll always like you." Wu Yuan smiled. "That's a pity. I just like the kind of person who would break up with me as soon as they hear that I'm sick." He looked at the corner of his sleeve that had been touched with disgust, then turned around and walked towards the crowd at the banquet beside. Under the bright lights, he had walked quite a distance away, but suddenly turned around. His voice wasn't low and most people's eyes were attracted. Wu Yuan put his hands in his trouser pockets, his eyebrows and eyes looking gloomy. "Also, I came to your birthday banquet not to support you, but just couldn't help wanting to see my damn ex-girlfriend, Ran." Ning's face turned pale, and she exclaimed, "But Ah Yuan, do you know what kind of person Ran is? Where is she from? She's not even from the Ran family. What kind of person am I?" Ning had given me the answer when I was 14. At that time, my mother had been dead for 2 years. Tianling had remarried. Unfortunately, my stepmother didn't like me very much and the child she brought along didn't like me either. Dad was very kind to Ning, kinder than to me. The love he gave me was so little that it was almost stingy. I had an album of paintings, all of which were paintings of my mother. I missed her far more than anyone else. But when I was away, Ning cut the album into pieces with scissors and said triumphantly, "Ran, Dad told me that you're an adopted child. Look, your mother had a heart disease, and your grandmother also had a heart disease, but only you don't." I snatched the album back and the scissors scratched under her eyes. Then I was sent to my grandmother's house in the water town. I had never believed what she said, but later I found out that often children's words without restraint were the truth. I came to deliver the paintings today and hadn't expected to meet her at first. But now I called out her name, Ning. She turned her head around. "Do you want to know what kind of person you are?" I lit a cigarette, looking tired and lazy. "A spoiled and stupid girl in a remarried family. You don't have much talent. Even if you study art for 10 more lifetimes, you'll never catch up with my talent, so you were jealous and cut up my album of paintings. You're vulgar and utilitarian. Of course you'll love Wu Yuan. As long as he's the heir of the Wu family, you'll love him without hesitation. You can't wait to show me your happiness, but do you know what I saw? I saw a piece of rotten bread surrounded by flies, yet you're still enjoying and showing off their flattery and bites." I didn't raise my voice, but it was very clear in the night. To the astonishment of the onlookers there was complete silence. Ning screamed, her lips trembling. She was as humiliated as if she had been stripped naked in public. I said indifferently, "Yes, you guessed right. I've always looked down on you." It was already 7 o'clock in the evening when I left the Wu family. I drove to a private clinic to have a chat with a familiar psychologist. Maybe it would help me forget the past events that had been brought up today. By the time I came out, the city had fallen into silence. There were no stars or fireflies in the night here. There was a pure black motorcycle parked below the steps. Wu Yuan didn't look well and asked, suppressing his emotions, "What are you doing here so late at night?" The moonlight was as cool as water soaking the steps. I didn't answer his question. I just looked at him quietly for a while. Wu Yuan. I know that you bought those paintings, tried to anger me, and helped me out of trouble, all as indirect or direct attempts to test me. But let's stop here. Wu Yuan raised his head, pursed his lips, and all the color drained from his face. He asked why? He almost threw away all his dignity and forced a smile. Rand, didn't I tell you that my illness was cured? If you once loved me. If you left me because of my flaw. But now that I've filled the gap, can you turn back and love me again? I shook my head and said in a calm voice, your illness is cured, but I'm sick now. Children always have strange thoughts. I'll always remember what Ning said, Ran, you're an adopted child. Look, your mother had a heart disease, and your grandmother also had a heart disease, but only you don't. I won't understand why just after I painted a picture for my mother she quietly fell asleep and would never wake up. I won't be able to let it go that when I just went out to pick fresh tea leaves and came back I saw my grandmother close her eyes. Is being healthy a sin? Maybe it is. Sometimes I wish I had a heart disease, at least then I could deceive myself into thinking that I'm my mother's child. But I'm not. In the 2 years after my grandmother also passed away, I lived alone in the old house left by my grandmother. By chance, I met Wu Yuan. I was very happy to meet him and I was also happy to like him. He was such an charming young man. But he had a bad heart. One day he would leave me, just like my mother and grandmother. I liked him so much. Why did he also become a punishment for me? I don't understand. How merciless I was when I judged Ning, but where was I so noble myself? I'm such a selfish and cowardly person. When we broke up, what I said wasn't a lie. If I had known earlier that he had this illness, I would rather not have met him. How hurtful and how true. What an embarrassing face I have. I feel deeply guilty towards him. Later, my depressive emotions manifested physically. I often had hallucinations of heart discomfort. There were even 2 years when I couldn't hold a paintbrush because it was so serious. Is being healthy a sin? Then I've come to atone for it. Since I was straightforward with Wu Yuan and told him the truth, life has returned to the former calm. I've always believed in the word fairness. He was sick and I left, I'm sick and he ended it. It was originally a very equal thing. Senior gave me a long vacation. I bought a ship ticket and got a visa. I didn't know where the destination was. Life twists and turns as it moves forward, and maybe everywhere is a way back home. I went to the gallery to take one last look. Unexpectedly, the staff there prepared a surprise for me. The moment the candles were lit and the ribbons were blown down, I realized that it was my birthday again. Senior carefully carried a cake and appeared. The cake was quite special. It didn't look like it was customized in a store. It was vaguely familiar. The moment I took a bite, Senior gave me a hug. Happy birthday, Ran. Go out and relax. It was also at that moment that I remembered why the taste of this cake was so familiar. In which year was it? In the warm water town, the pampered young master washed his hands and made a cake himself. He threatened me ferociously, saying that I wasn't allowed to say it didn't taste good. He turned his head sideways, his earlobes turning red. I couldn't help but kiss him on the cheek. Once upon a time, once upon a time. I asked Senior, where is he? The senior said, he didn't come. There was a cake at both the beginning and the end of the story. It could be considered a good beginning and a good ending. On the day I boarded the ship, I looked into the distance from the shore. The thick fog on the sea had been blown ashore. I turned around and saw Wu Yuan coming out of the fog. The sea breeze blew my hair at the temples. I said, have you come to see me off? I rather inappropriately remembered a line from a movie I watched before, which had been lingering in my mind, if there was one more ship ticket, would you go with me? But I didn't say it out loud. Wu Yuan stood in front of me. His long and narrow eyes looked at me for a long time. I thought he was going to say goodbye, but then he stretched out his long arm, grasped the back of my head firmly, and pressed me into his neck, gritting his teeth. There's no seeing off, no parting. I'm going with you. I was stunned and my eyes felt a bit sour. He said, if you dare to leave me alone again, you're dead. Listen to me. The past is in the past, Ran. Take good care of yourself. If you want to paint, paint. If you want to travel, travel. If you want to reminisce, reminisce. You're the child I've chosen, and you'll always be rewarded no matter what. I'm an abandoned child, but I'm the child chosen by my mother. I'm worthy of being loved. Look forward, Ran. I'll accompany you, Ran. The thick fog was blown away by the wind, and the sea was vast and blue. The route of the voyage gradually became clear. I heard my own answer. I said, okay.